The Hexham Heads UK, 1971. There are stories that drift quietly through the cracks of history, stories that never become famous headlines, yet leave behind a soft, unsettling trail of unease. They are not loud, dramatic, or violent. Instead, they whisper. They linger. They take root in the corners of the mind, like cold fingers brushing the edge of a curtain at night. The story of the Hexham Heads, discovered in a quiet English town in 1971, is one of these whispers. It begins with two children, a small backyard garden, and something older than memory, something carved by hands that might not have been entirely human. This is the kind of tale that unrolls gently, like fog creeping across a field. Slow, calm, atmospheric. And yet, beneath its quietness lies a deep and unnerving mystery. An ancient stone folklore mystery that people still cannot fully explain. Underscore 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 underscore. The town of Hexham is not the kind of place where legends should come alive. It is ordinary, peaceful, predictable, a place of trimmed hedges, stone walls, and narrow streets washed by soft English rain. But sometimes, the unexpected hides inside the ordinary. Sometimes, something strange waits just beneath the soil. And sometimes, it is children who uncover it. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 1. The Garden Discovery. It was a cold March afternoon in 1971 when Colin and Leslie Robson, two young brothers, wandered into their small back garden after school. The light was fading, turning the sky into a pale, washed-out gray. Their boots squelched in the damp earth as they dug where the soil seemed soft from a recent frost. They weren't looking for anything in particular. They were just passing the time, scraping, poking, turning over rocks the way boys do. Then Colin's metal trowel scraped against something hard. Not stone. Not metal. Something different. "Leslie, look," he said. He dug around it with careful fingers, pulling free a small round object, a carved head, its features roughly shaped, its expression frozen in a strange, unnatural grin. Moments later, Leslie found another one. Two heads. Two grimacing, vaguely human faces staring up from the soil as if they had been waiting. The boys, excited, rushed inside to show their mother. The heads were small enough to fit in a child's palm, heavy, with a gritty texture. They looked ancient, as if carved centuries earlier. One had wide, staring eyes. The other seemed almost animalistic, with a snarl carved into its mouth. Their mother wiped the dirt from her hands and frowned. She didn't know it yet, but these two strange objects would change everything. They would bring nights of fear. Unexplained footsteps. Dark figures at the edge of vision. And something large, something that moved like an animal, but stood like a man. The Hexham Heads had awakened. underscore 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 Chapter 2. The first unsettling signs. That night, the house felt colder than usual. It was a kind of cold that didn't come from broken heating or open windows. It felt like a presence, like someone watching. The boys placed the heads on their dresser and went to sleep. Hours later, their mother shot awake hearing what she later described as the sound of glass tinkling, as if something small but heavy had hopped across the floor. She rose from bed and stepped into the hallway. Something moved. A small shadow, quick and skittering, darted past her bare feet. She gasped and flicked on the light. The hallway was empty, but something else had changed. The faint smell like earth freshly turned after rain hung in the air. And far down the hallway, one of the boys' bedroom doors creaked open, just a few inches. She called their names softly. No response. She walked slowly, each step heavy with dread she couldn't explain. When she reached the room, Colin and Leslie were fast asleep, blankets undisturbed, the carved heads still sitting on the dresser. But the mother could not shake the feeling that something had just left the room. Something that didn't belong in any ordinary English home. Underscore 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 Chapter 3. The creature appears. Over the following days, strange occurrences began to stack one on top of another. Objects moved overnight. A vase shattered in an empty room. A neighbor reported seeing a tall figure crouched by the Robsons' hedge at dusk, something too large to be a dog, yet moving with something like an animal's gait. The Robsons tried to ignore it, to explain it away, to rationalize, until one night, the youngest daughter screamed. Their mother rushed into her room to find the girl pressed against the far wall, trembling. "What did you see?" her mother whispered. The girl's voice shook. "It was in here. Something big. It had hair. It looked at me." The chill ran through the mother's body. The carved heads were on the floor now, several feet away from where the boys had placed them, facing the doorway, as if they had been moved deliberately. And suddenly, everything felt wrong. The air was heavy, oppressive, alive. Whatever the Hexham Heads were, they were not simply toys or ancient trinkets. They were connected to something. Something that had been sleeping. Something that was now awake. Underscore 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 Chapter 4. The folklorist arrives. News of the strange stone heads spread quietly through Hexham, carried by whispers and nervous conversations. Eventually, the story reached the ears of Professor N. Ross, the respected expert in Celtic and pagan history. When she heard about the discovery, something inside her stirred. She had studied ancient rituals, forgotten symbols, and the worship practices of early European tribes. To her, the rough faces of the heads sounded familiar, too familiar. She believed they resembled Celtic ritual carvings, objects sometimes associated with protection, and sometimes with curses. Ross contacted the family and asked to study the heads. The Robsons were relieved. Finally, someone who might offer answers. But they could never have predicted what would happen next. Underscore 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 Chapter 5. Spirits in Ross's house. Ross took the heads home, placing them on her desk for closer examination. She expected long nights of careful study, quiet contemplation, and academic insight. What she got instead was fear. That very night, Ross awoke to the sound of heavy breathing. Not human breathing. Animal breathing. Deep, slow, wet. She sat up, her heart pounding. The tall, shadowy figure stood at the foot of her bed, its outline faint, its form blurred like smoke. But its posture was unmistakably animalistic, hunched, with long arms hanging low. She blinked, and the figure vanished. The next night, it happened again, this time accompanied by the sound of scratching on the walls, like claws dragging over plaster. Ross, a rational woman, tried to explain it away. Sleep paralysis, perhaps. Stress. Imagination. But when she awoke to find the heads moved from her desk to her bedroom floor, perfectly centered at the foot of her bed, she could no longer deny the truth. Something was wrong with these stones. Terribly wrong. She returned them to the Robsons immediately, shaken and pale. But not before writing in her notes, "Whatever these objects are, they hold a presence, a force that is active and aware." Underscore 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 Chapter 6. The Beast of Hexham. The sightings grew bolder. Neighbors began reporting the half-man, half-beast creature wandering the streets at night. Some described glowing eyes. Others heard deep, guttural growls echoing in their gardens. One man swore he watched the creature vault the 6-foot stone wall without effort. The police were called several times, but they found nothing. Theories spread. A wolfman, a supernatural guardian, a summoned spirit, or something much older, tied to ancient rituals long forgotten to some. It seemed as if the creature had been awakened by the heads, or perhaps it had always been connected to them, bound like a shadow to a body. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: the Hexham Heads were no longer just archaeological curiosities. They were catalysts. And something was stirring because of them. Underscore 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 Chapter 7. The controversial twist. Years later, The man named Dick Craigie claimed that he not an ancient tribe had made the heads in the 1950s as simple toys for his daughter. He insisted they were modern, harmless, meaningless. Some accepted his explanation, but many did not. Because how could a pair of modern toys cause so many unexplained events? How could they move on their own, cause sightings witnessed by multiple families, create fear in people who had never even met the Robsons? And why did the carved faces resemble ancient Celtic motifs so closely? Skeptics clung to Craigie's claim. Believers dismissed it entirely. As for the truth, it remained somewhere in the great space between where folklore meets reality, and reality bends into the unexplained. Underscore 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 Chapter 8. Vanished into history. Eventually, the Hexham Heads were passed from one researcher to another, and over time, they simply disappeared. Lost, misplaced, or perhaps taken. No one knows where they are now. Some believe they were stolen by collectors of occult artifacts. Others think they were purposely hidden to prevent more strange events. And a few whisper that the heads went back to wherever they originally came from, returned to the earth, buried once more, waiting for another curious child with a shovel. The town of Hexham continued on, quiet and peaceful. But residents still remember. They still talk of the creatures seen in the hedges, the cold nights, the feeling of being watched. And they still wonder what ancient force awakened in 1971. Underscore 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 underscore. The mystery without an ending. The Hexham Heads remain one of the strangest unexplained stories in modern British folklore. Not dramatic, not violent, but deeply unsettling. They sit at the crossroads of archaeology, myth, and the supernatural, too unusual to dismiss, too elusive to prove. The whisper from a forgotten past. A question that refuses to be answered. An ancient stone folklore mystery wrapped in darkness and silence. Were the heads cursed? Were they ritual objects? Were they guardians? Or were they simply stones onto which people projected fear? No one knows. And perhaps that is why the story endures. Because the Hexham Heads remind us that the world still hides secrets. That beneath calm earth and quiet towns lie mysteries older than history itself. And that sometimes, the past is not dead. It is only sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it.